In this lesson, we'll encounter a concept called educational signaling. And this is the idea that while education also equips us with knowledge and skills, it's also doing something else. It's signaling to other people about qualities we have. Now, the signaling theory has been applied to other domains, for example, in animal behavior. And here we'll give an example of the gazelle. Now, the gazelle engages in a behavior called stotting or pronking. They make really sort of high jumps, and it's pretty impressive to see that. Here I'll just show some young gazelles practicing the behavior. Here we see some young gazelles, and you'll notice that little behavior right there is stotting, sort of a four-legged launch into the air. Now, it raised a question for biologists who are studying this behavior. What's the purpose of the stotting? I mean, it takes energy to do this. Well, immediately, of course, the hypotheses presented themselves because everybody knew that in the environment of the gazelle were predators, like cheetahs. And of course, cheetahs are very fast predators. Gazelles are also fast. And so it raised the possibility that perhaps the stotting was a signal to the predator, to the cheetah. Well, what would it signal? Well, given the nature of stotting, you need to be sort of healthy and strong and fast to do the stotting behavior, well, healthy and strong. And perhaps that stotting behavior was an indication that the gazelle itself was healthy and fast. And so it would not be in the interest of the cheetah to chase a gazelle that stots. Of course, that's from the cheetah's point of view, but of course it's in the interest of the gazelle to dissuade a cheetah to even begin the chase. Well, what's the evidence that stotting is serving this signaling function? Let's take a look at some data collected. Here we have when gazelles stot and when gazelles do not stot. When gazelles stot, here we see the proportion of hunts that were abandoned. So cheetahs are abandoning the hunt almost 3/4 of the time. When they do chase, the chase failed. If the particular gazelle did not stot, half the time the hunt was abandoned. About 1/4 of the time the chase failed, but almost 1/4 of the time the gazelle was captured and killed. So comparing these two situations, then, it appears that stotting is having an effect on cheetah behavior. So the way biologists would understand this, then, that stotting gazelles are signaling to cheetahs their health and their physical qualities, and cheetahs are monitoring those signals and using those signals to adjust their behavior. Now, signals in nature can only evolve if they benefit both parties, the sender and the receiver. If the signal harms the sender, in this case the gazelle, by somehow benefiting the receiver, then natural selection will eliminate those senders. If the signal harms the receiver, the cheetah, by benefiting the sender, then natural selection will eliminate those receivers, those cheetahs. So in this case, then, the signal is benefiting both. The gazelles, if they can stot, they can avoid a chase from a cheetah. And on the other hand, cheetahs that are seeing stotting gazelles can look elsewhere for gazelles that are not stotting. That will save them the energy. Cheetahs don't have a lot of fat reserves. They don't have a lot of spare energy. So by avoiding a chase, that is in the interest of the cheetah. Now, for signals to evolve in nature, the signal must be hard to fake. Has to be an honest signal. If unhealthy gazelles could fake the signal, the value of the signal is diminished. So, maybe unhealthy gazelles could secretly put springs on their feet to stot. Well, then the healthy gazelles would no longer stand out for their exceptional stotting. So signals have to be hard to fake. Now, with that background about signaling in animal behavior, let's see if we can understand any aspect of education as having a signaling function. So the question is education a signal? Now, in a recent book by Brian Kaplan called The Case Against Education, he makes this argument. Now, at the outset, I'll say he's a sort of a libertarian type thinker, and his conclusions about government funding of education and so on are not the concern here, but just the concept of education serving a signaling function. It might be instructive for students and teachers to think about. Now, he begins with the basic question, the market seems to reward education. Well, why is that? And by market, we mean that employers in the economy seem to pay people with educations higher wages. Now, why would that be? Well, the straightforward answer would be people with educations have more knowledge and skills, and so they can command greater wages in the economy. And Kaplan is going to argue that there's something to that. Of course, schools teach some basic skills, reading and math skills, for example, that are widely applicable to many kinds of occupations. So that is part of the story. But as teachers and students, we also know that a lot of what we learn in school is forgotten. And so on the surface, right away, it does pose a question. If a lot of what we learn in school is forgotten, why would the market be rewarding all of that time spent in school learning these things that we will forget? In addition to all that we forget, as many students have complained over the years since education began, there is the issue of learning things that don't seem applicable for the rest of your life. And so again, that raises the question, why would employers in the economy be rewarding students for learning things that are not going to be relevant to their occupations later on? And the thesis that Kaplan tests in his book is that the market isn't rewarding you for the useless subjects you master or the ones you forgot, but for the pre-existing traits that you reveal by mastering them. And by useless here, he means not directly needed for job performance. So again, the puzzle was, why are employers rewarding individuals for an education when a lot of time is spent learning things that are not relevant to the job, and a lot of what we learn is forgotten? And Kaplan's argument is a lot of what education is doing then, aside from equipping individuals with knowledge and skills, is signaling to the employers about pre-existing qualities. So Kaplan applies the signaling theory then to education. There are a couple of assumptions that there must be different types of people. One's type is not obvious, so you can't see one's work ethic upon meeting them, right? So that's not knowable on the surface, right? By meeting a person, you don't know their work ethic. One's type must visibly differ on average as measured over time. So there's got to be variation in the different types of people, and those variations must have real consequences in an employment situation. So the idea then is that the reason employers are giving a premium to education, paying higher wages, is because employers are using success in school as a predictive signal about success in the workplace. So if one can overcome educational obstacles, then that would make them capable of overcoming obstacles in the work environment. Boiled down, if you're good at school, you're going to be a good employee. So employers are using educational success as a signal of quality for future employment. Now, what would education signal? Kaplan argues intelligence, conscientiousness, and social conformity. Intelligence then would be the capacity to process information and to solve problems, etc. Conscientiousness, discipline, work ethic, commitment to quality. Can you finish the task that you started? Social conformity, submission to social expectations. In the school setting, your parents want you to do well in school, your teachers want you to do the homework, etc. Now, from this point of view then, those three qualities, intelligence, conscientiousness, and social conformity, are like a motivational rocket. They're going to help propel you over the obstacles that you encounter in an educational setting. So, in a school, when you're taking courses, we can think of the demands of the coursework as the obstacles. And individuals with all of these three qualities are going to be able to meet the demands and jump over those obstacles. Of course, different kinds of coursework might present more or less obstacles. So some courses, there's more information to master, it's more difficult. Some assignments may be very complex. If you have to write a paper or do a project or something, you have to organize it, and there are multiple steps, and that takes executive function, etc. You got time pressures in school. So all these things are like obstacles in school. And Kaplan's argument is that individuals with some mix or all of these qualities are going to be able to jump over the obstacles. So good grades then in school signal the whole package. If you're getting good grades, it is signaling that you have sufficient intelligence, you can learn quickly or deeply, that you're conscientious, you'll work until the assignment is finished and it's done well. Social conformity would mean that you will be able to obey the boss and work well with other colleagues in your work environment. Now, one can have offsetting weaknesses, so one might not be strong in all three categories. Might be a little weaker in one category, but make up for it in others. So you might be intelligent, but lacking conformity. You don't really want to, buy into what your teachers are telling you to do or what your parents want for you. You might be hardworking, but you're lacking intelligence. So these qualities then can sort of offset each other. You might be weak in one department but strong in other departments. We can use a grid like this to show how the offsetting qualities might work. So we'll take the first trait here, intelligence, high and low, and then their performance. You're getting A's, you're getting C's. And you'll notice as we go through all three, the box up here, top left and bottom right, is the idea that whatever characteristic this is a causal factor in the outcome. So if you have high intelligence and you're getting A's, intelligence might be a causal factor in your success. If you have low intelligence and you're getting C's, the lack of intelligence may be a causal factor in the outcome. It's the other boxes where the compensating characteristics come into play. So you might have high intelligence, but you're lacking either in conscientiousness or social conformity. So maybe you just can't finish the task, or maybe you just don't buy into the task in the first place, and you're not going to do it just because your parents or your teacher wants you to do the work. If you have low intelligence then, but you're getting the A's, you're compensating with those other two qualities. Likewise with conscientiousness, again, the two boxes here, it may be a causal factor, but if you have high conscientiousness and you're getting C's, it may be because you're lacking either in intelligence or social conformity. On the other hand, if you have low conscientiousness, you have trouble sort of with discipline and whatnot, you may be able to get by a bit with your intelligence and just willing to please your parents and teachers and so on. That may help you motivate to get the work done. And finally, conformity. Again, causal factor for these two boxes, high conformity, so you're eager to please your parents or your teachers, but you're getting C's due to either low intelligence or poor conscientiousness. And if you have low conformity, you're kind of just not into what others expect of you. You still may get the A's due to high intelligence or your ability to stick with the task. Notice also then, education, like signals in nature, is hard to fake. The duration is long, many hoops to jump through that require self-regulation. Students must persist, manage emotions, stay focused, etc. And so when we think about why is it that education is a good signal for future work performance, well, education takes a long time, multiple years of obstacles that require that combination, intelligence, conscientiousness, and social conformity. So at the end result, if you're able to do well in school, it's a good signal for future work performance. Now, one thing to note here, just as in nature, faking the signal harms others. So the gazelles that could fake the signal are harming the gazelles that really can perform the honest signal. Now, teachers often point out that cheating or cramming only hurts the student. Well, evidently, some students don't mind the harm to themselves. But fake signals also hurt others because fake signals diminish the value of the signal. Like the example of the unhealthy gazelles with springs on the feet, healthy gazelles would protest because they can no longer stand out as exceptionally healthy. And this, of course, is why students object to other students cheating. Maybe we should put more emphasis as teachers on the social costs of faking one's competence rather than saying it harms the self. It's harming others in the class. Now, can educational signaling explain anything? Well, it does explain why the degree matters so much. Employers prefer the person with the degree compared to the person 1 credit short of the degree. And forgetting does not diminish the signal, but an F in a class does. 2 students might have the same knowledge base, but employers will prefer the student who earned the A but forgot everything compared to the student who earned the F. And again, we should say again, why is forgetting why doesn't it impact the signal? Because the idea, if you got the A, you have demonstrated the capacity, the wherewithal, the intelligence, conscientiousness, and conformity to do the task. Whether you forget it or not is not relevant to the function of the signal. Because from this view, again, education is not about acquiring knowledge and skills, but about demonstrating that you have what it takes to do the educational tasks. Can signaling explain anything else? Well, students are motivated to take the easy classes for the easy A. And if knowledge was the key to future earnings, then this would harm one's prospects. So again, it could be that students are harming themselves by taking the easy classes for the easy A, or they realize that much of what education is a signal to future employers. Students are motivated to cheat. It works because not everyone cheats, and those with better grades are, on average, better workers. Again, cheating preserves the signal, but it's a fake signal, and it's harming others because then their good grades will no longer stand out. Now, considering education as a signal does raise some fundamental questions for teachers. What are teachers doing? Do we as teachers transform students, X's into Y's, students into productive workers? Or do we evaluate whether X's have the right stuff to be the Y's? So in other words, to what degree do teachers sculpt students or appraise them? Now, who cares whether education is serving a signaling function? And this now is getting into sort of Kaplan's argument, the book, which is not the main point of this, but students don't have to really care if the value of education is partially or a large part signaling. They simply have to send a good signal to get the benefits, and the benefits are higher wages in the economy. But society has more at stake, argues Kaplan. There are negative externalities to increasing education. If more people signal more education, employers will raise their expectations, causing what he calls credential inflation. And you get to a point where it takes more and more education to get the job than do the job. And that costs society. And so then, by considering some portion of education to serve a signaling function, it does raise some interesting things to think about as students and as teachers. Students often complain that what they're learning will not be useful to them later in their life. Well, if we think about education serving a signaling function, teachers can say back to them, that may be true, but your ability to navigate the course right now is sending a signal. And so this may be one way to address students who find it hard to motivate if they don't think that what they're learning is going to be directly applicable to their careers later on. If we start to think of some portion of education serving a signaling function, perhaps we can sustain some of their motivation to do well in school.